Welcome to A Financial Advisor and Pastor Walk Into a Bar. In this two-part episode, Jason and Benjie go down many rabbit holes before finding themselves in Hebrews 12. Let's have a listen. Hello, my name is Benjie Escara, Financial Advisor, and my co-host is Pastor Jason Duke. And with the start of 2025, we decided to change the format just a little bit. A bit more conversation and a little less structure. So hope you guys like it. All right, perfect. So what I was saying was that we went to Dallas. I was at the lunch down at Businessmen Christian.
Please try again.
Business Christian Men's Networking Lunch. I've been doing this for like a year. We're going to it. It's called 10 More Talents, and they have 10 more talents.
10 more talents.
And you're familiar with that?
I thought you said 10 more. I was like, who's 10 more? No.
Yeah, you're familiar with the parable, right?
Yes, oh yeah.
So the idea is they want to have businessmen who are Christians to talk about how their Christian walk isn't separated between their work life and their faith life. So,
okay. The joining of the two circles.
Yeah, or just that you don't build a wall, because I keep doing that. I've been doing that for a long time. I've been trying to break that wall down between work and my faith. And the group is structured. You do networking, then you have lunch, and then you have a speaker that comes in and talks about how his faith life, and it's a men's Christian, so it's how his faith life has helped him out in his career, and how the career has kind of opened opportunities in his faith life, I guess is a good way of putting it.
Very cool.
Everything's centered, around your faith. It's just that the idea that you can't talk about your faith and your work together is non-existent. You can always do that. And in fact, your work life, if you're not in ministry, that's your ministry.
Yeah.
Ministry is, your work. And so today we had a guy, his name is Aaron Van, and he's the operator over at Chick-fil-A down in Richardson off of 75. And he was talking about how he got there, because he used to be pharmaceutical guy, pharmaceutical sales. He did that for a long time. But before that, he was in the Army.
Navy.
He was Army infantry for a few years.
I'm seeing a few similarities in terms of medical sales and military.
Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
I got out of the military and then got into HR, but then got introduced into the pacemaker world, right? Because of my roommate at West Point. Then I go in there and it's like, whoa, there's a lot of West Pointers here.
That's interesting.
Yeah, more than I figured. And then you go into pharma. It's kind of like the same thing, where you run into a lot of military officers. Junior military officers seem to have get recruited to go into those kind of spaces.
Into recruiting or
into medical sales, maybe.
Very interesting.
Pharmaceutical sales or medical sales. And it could be just the lifestyle, because some of these sales are pretty rough in terms of the lifestyle. Because the first thing I remember going into pacemaker sales, and the thing they put out there is that this isn't a job, this is a lifestyle.
Yeah.
And when I heard that, I was like, in my head, I'm just like, duh. But that's the mentality that you have coming out of the military, is that your work is your lifestyle.
Yeah.
Right. But anyway, that's like a rabbit hole. The lunch.
Sorry, I kind of got you distracted. My bad.
No, but the lunch. So Aaron talked about his transition from. And how God was moving him from one place to the next. And Chick-fil-A is, it's wild. I didn't know how different a company it was. Even with Diego working there, right?
Yep.
And he's been there for 3 years. I can't believe he's been working there for 3 years.
Where was he at?
He's over the one on Stacy.
Okay, yep.
Yeah, so he's been there for 3 years now, and I could tell even before we worked there, is that I used to work at McDonald's when I was in high school, and then I saw how different things are with the way people care for their job, I guess.
No.
And service sucks. I mean, it's
at Chick-fil-A?
No.
Yeah, kidding.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. I mean,
yes.
It just seemed like, well, maybe I'm just an old man, and I'm just thinking about how things used to be, right?
Versus, yeah.
But I just thought, when I was working at McDonald's, it was just make sure this and this is inside the bag before you close it up and you hand it off. And it feels like every time I open my bag, I'm just thinking, I need to go and ask him for a napkin. I need to ask him for, where's my straw?
Yeah.
Or
there's no training and there's no quality control measures.
Yeah. There's something that they used to say when I was working was clean as you go. And I'm not that I inspected anything, but it's just when I look and I can see behind the counter, I just think, wow, okay, well, I guess that's gone too. But
Yeah.
but when I think about the environment that are in those other fast food restaurants, and I think about Chick-fil-A, it's a totally different experience as a customer.
Yes.
But I'd imagine it's the same thing as an employee. It's a totally different experience, right?
Yeah.
Working there versus working in these other places. And what Aaron was saying when he was talking about becoming an operator was just, I can see that. I can see why people would want to work there. And even though at least kids who are coming in, the paycheck isn't competitive, just to put it out there. And the other chains are paying more, but I think Diego would still want to work at Chick-fil-A, or he does, because the environment that he's working in is
very,
a better
very
one,
different,
right? Very different, and just being blunt, it's a better environment.
Yeah,
I would think. But going back to Aaron's story, is that he gave some insight as to how he was picked up to go and become an operator. And he said it was a 3-year process of just interviewing.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that part of it. And he said he continued his job as, in pharmaceutical sales, during that 3-year time period, just trying to do the best that he can as a pharmaceutical person. But at the same time, he's just, trying to go and figure out, how do I best present myself to Chick-fil-A? And they look at it as a relationship and a courtship, is what he said, as opposed to an interview process. And he said, I had several no's during those 3 years, and it wasn't, no, you're out of the process, but it was no, that you're not going to go to this Chick-fil-A that we were looking at.
Yeah.
And he just kept on, going through it. Yeah.
Yep.
And it was just, it's like, okay, well, then I get an idea of the type of people that are running it now. And then the other side of it too was that the structure of it, it's not, you're a employee of Chick-fil-A. He's an LLC, and he's partnered with Chick-fil-A for that location.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, that's different. I didn't even think that was, how the structure was, but it seems to present a bit of an autonomy or something. You get that?
Yeah. It's
okay.
I'm not sure who it is.
So yeah, that's kind of what I was at my lunch, and it was interesting. I knew Aaron, and we've talked about his past of how he's gone from the different jobs, but I didn't know that much about Chick-fil-A, or the experience that he had there to get to Chick-fil-A. But he's a great guy. But that story was interesting. So that's what those lunches are.
It's interesting to hear you talk about the Chick-fil-A side. And this may not be anything about what we're going to talk about, but I've got two guys that I went to college with are now operators, and one of them has 2 locations, and one of them has one here in the DFW area.
Okay.
And then the church I previously served at, 2 of the guys that were on our team, a volunteer team, are both operators.
Yeah.
Here in the area as well. And so it was really, really cool getting to visit with them and talk with them, because one of the things that I've seen in them is the way in which they treat their staff. Yeah. And one of them does some things just incredible. Like, he takes certain staff members on cruises, or taking them with Broadway plays and stuff, because he loves cruises, he loves Broadway plays, and so he'll do like reward type stuff at the end of the year, at different points of the year. So all that being said, the training, the development, and the way in which they, instead of looking at employees and say, man, I've got to do everything within my power to retain that employee, they're looking at it and saying, hey, how do I help them get their own store? And so it almost becomes this development process of trying to train people up so you can send them out in order for them to go get their own location. Yeah. And of course with Chick-fil-A, they don't own those locations. They're simply the operator. Chick-fil-A retained all ownership. Yeah. But to be able to be that connector, or that central piece of putting them in play to be able to have their own store is a cool thing. So it's just kind of neat, the model that they have, and they're just some really cool stuff. And so. Yeah. And he talked about the mission too, which was, to be, I don't know it exactly, but it was Christ-centered, and it was the idea of trying to get God's message out there as well through what they do. Yeah. And that's pretty cool. I kind of knew it, but I didn't know it, that specific, I guess. And the Kathy family is very outspoken, just in unashamedly being Christian. Yeah. And they don't hold back on that. And that's cool. Yeah, it's pretty cool. They're well respected in that sense.
Cool. So this past week you had gone to You said the pastors conference.
Yeah, campus. It's called the Campus Pastors Summit.
Okay.
And it's geared and designed for multi-site churches of course 2 or more campuses.
Yeah.
And this one was specifically geared for campus pastors.
Okay.
So we have to talk a lot about the things, the challenges that we have, the things that we deal with on a operational basis,
right?
But also just spiritually speaking, and staffing opportunities and things of that nature. And so it was really, really cool because there was spiritually, there were some challenges there and some things where God was encouraging me, but also convicting me. On the staffing front, there was some things, or, leading your staff, there were some challenges and encouragements there. But even from, one of the guys I met, his name is Jim Tomberlin. And in the multi-site world, mm-hmm. Jim is, lovingly referred to as the godfather of multi-site. Okay. And this dude started multi-site back in the 70s. Before multi-site became a thing.
Is this the satellite campus thing?
Yeah. Okay. Having multiple campuses. So one church, multiple campuses.
Okay.
And so Jim Tomberlin, in Colorado, I don't even remember where in Colorado they were exactly, but in Colorado, he's basically looking at his church. He's like, hey, we got a small building. We're running multiple services. We can't keep up this pace much longer.
Right.
Just because we're killing ourselves. And he's like, so we do one of two things. We either say we're not going to grow anymore, or we figure out another solution. And the only solution I can think of is let's go 20 minutes away. Okay. And let's go have another church building, but yet still do the same thing we're doing here. So that's, so he was one of the pioneers of multi-siting. And then, of course, Willow Creek Church in Chicago heard about what he was doing and brought him. So he became staff there to help Willow Creek do. And then Willow Creek, of course, became the example, if you will. But all this was through Jim Tomberlin. So we're at this conference, and I went to one of his classes or one of his sessions. And it was so funny because, afterwards, I had asked him a question during the session, but afterwards I said, hey, Jim, I just wanted you to know, man, how much I appreciate, sharing some of these things. You've really been, encouraging, challenging me.
Yeah.
And he's like, great, what's your name? And it's not telling my name. And he goes, what hotel are you staying at? And I told him the hotel name, and he goes, me too. And he goes, I need a ride. Will you give me a ride? And so I was like, yeah, sure, Jim. But it was so cool because our ride was, 10 to 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So Tuesday, I gave him a ride back to the hotel. We went out that night as a large group, about 120 of us or so. So we went out to Redneck Riviera in downtown Nashville. I gave him a ride there, gave him a ride back. Wednesday morning, I give him a ride there, to the conference Wednesday evening. Dude, but we got, overall, it's probably, man, of just, been in his ear and picking his brain. We probably talked for an hour or so, maybe hour and a half. I don't know.
That's cool.
It was awesome. And it was just, having somebody that has been doing this for, almost 50 years now.
Yeah.
And everything he's learned and the experiences and the coaching. And here I am just, man, I'm soaking it up like a sponge, and I'm not having to pay for anything, I was able to bend his ear, and it was awesome. So there was a lot of great things that came from that, but
that's pretty cool. I wish I had, enough knowledge in my head that I can go and tell somebody, hey, you want to be my personal Uber? And I'll just, I'll just talk to you the whole time, and then we'll call it even.
And that was exactly what happened. It was awesome. I felt so used, but I was so thankful. No, but it was incredible, man. We had a great time.
Okay, so you said 1970, right?
So sometime in the 70s. Yeah, I don't know the exact year, but
what did they do? Because they didn't have, satellite like broadcast the thing. So what is it? Is it video?
So how they did it then, I don't know.
Okay.
Exactly. There's multiple ways that it could have been done. That's a great question. I don't know why I never thought of that, asking him. But even thinking back then, multiple ways that it could have been done was simply, being on a 1 day delay. So if you record like on a Friday night or a Saturday, you edit, back in those days, what were we using? VHS? I don't even know what we were using back in the 70s. Yeah. So whatever we were using back in the 70s, of course I was born in 80, but,
that's right.
So am I a young pup? I'm a young pup in the room right
you
now.
are.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you could just record it, edit it, and then get it ready to play, put it in the system, play it the next day.
Okay.
Or you could even do a 1 week delay.
Yeah.
Or even say, hey, at this campus, we're going to have so-and-so live teaching. At this campus, so-and-so, and they could work on the sermons together, but just two different speakers. There's lots of different ways that we're seeing multi-site can be done.
Yeah.
How exactly they did it then, I don't know, but
Yeah, that's a different time when people were patient. So, right?
Yeah.
You can go and take a cassette, and then people would be salivating to go and listen, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just to go and press the play button, and you patiently wait for something to come.
Yeah.
And stuff.
Very true. Yeah. Times have changed.
Yeah, because now I'm going to be frustrated that I've got that little clock on my computer and it's only taking an extra 2 seconds or something.
I've just burnt 3 seconds of my life. Hurry up.
Right. So I guess we can talk a little bit about I don't know what we're going to talk about for the next one, but I guess continuing from what we said last time.
Yeah.
I'm following a series that is going on. Oh, before I get into that, your church.
Yeah.
Is it on podcast? Is it on iTunes? Did they do the sermons? Because I found something.
I know we're on YouTube, and of course, whatever streaming service or whatever that's called that we use. Dude, you're asking the absolutely wrong person. I'm a pastor of the church, and I should know this. Yeah, there he is. Okay.
That's your guy?
Yeah,
okay.
That's Chris Seaton. Yeah, that's our new pastor, the Branch Church. Yeah,
gotcha. Okay, I was listening to it on the way back up, and I was just thinking, okay, this is probably your church. I was just
so not to put you on the spot. What do you think? Is he doing a good job in preaching the word? No, I'm just.
It was good. It was I was kind of going through it, and I go through these podcast sermons, I guess is a better way of putting it, 2x speed. Yeah. I always have to listen to it twice. So the first time I went through, I was on my second time when I was at the gas station. So honestly, I don't remember much when I go through the second. I have to get through the third and the fourth. And I guess that's not a good way of doing it. It's like that multitasking that's going on where I'm driving, I'm thinking about something else, and I've got the podcast going or the sermon going, and I'm not thinking about it. But I guess that goes to another conversation of there's a funnel that goes on with church on Sunday, and I think of it in business like a sales funnel.
Okay.
And you try to capture the biggest audience at the top of the funnel, and then you start shaking it down, right? Yeah. And I don't know if I've said this to you before, but it's like the message that's on Sunday is a general concept. I don't want to say basic is the right word, but it's enough that, people that come in, the various understanding of the gospel or the Bible in general is the understanding of the person that's preaching. And so you want to go and give a message that is understandable for the broad range of people that are in the audience. Yep. And so when you're there on Sunday, sometimes it's wow, I never heard this before, or wow, I've heard this before. And maybe you don't pick up on it as much as you would if you heard it for the first time. Yeah. Right. And then you go and you get involved in the church a little bit more, and you go down that funnel, and it's small groups where you want to get to. Yep. Right. And so you get into the small group, and so the conversations and the Bible talks are a lot more meaningful than maybe what you see on Sunday. Maybe they go and talk about the sermon in the small group and say, what do you think? And then you start getting into it a little bit more, and you start looking into the Bible a little bit more, and then the funnel gets narrower, and it's the people that are down there that are going to that next step of volunteering. And now you're starting to do action, right? From the stuff that you learned on Sunday to the stuff that you learned on your small group. And now you're doing the things that you were talking about previously. And then you shake it down, and it's, I don't know where that goes, but, but that funnel, is where I think I have a hard time on Sunday, because I feel like, not to be self-righteous, but this is going to sound like it.
Oh, really?
I feel like I'm down at that level in the funnel that's where the volunteering is. Yeah. Right. And even that is a conversation, but because of that, the messages that are on Sunday sometimes, and maybe a lot of times, I feel like it's something that I end up glossing over a lot. And then the other stuff that I learn or I read during the week are things that I kind of pay a bit more attention to. But something I've said before too is that I don't have control as to what happens on Sunday in terms of the message, but during the week I have control. And so it's one of those things that I should be going. I feel like I need to go on Sunday because I'm not in control. God is going to point me to something that I'm not paying attention to, that I probably need to, right? And that's where the Sunday message is where I feel like sometimes it feels like it's a gloss over, but a lot of times, and probably almost every time, it's something that he's probably telling me you need to pay attention to because you're glossing over it. right? So, but anyway, I don't know why that came why that came up as a part of the conversation. But what is your take on the Sunday message? I mean, what is
You talking about at our church or in general?
just in general? Because
yeah,
I mean, you've done them at Ranchland
no,
all the way through, right?
Yeah.
So Sunday message. What is the take, or what is the party line?
Yeah, dude, that's a great question. I didn't know you were gonna make me think today. Golly. No, as you were talking about the funnel, before I even dive into that, I guess, you were talking about the funnel, and yes, in our church planning training that we've done in the past and all those different things, you talk about that funnel, and it's a great illustration, and it's not an uncommon way to talk about it.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, instead of it being the sermon at the top of that funnel at the widest point, we would talk about it as the Sunday morning experience.
Okay.
So the weekend worship services, that's the top of the funnel, because that's the way most people are coming in. Now, of course, some people come in through an invitation or whatever, but most people's engagement with a church is going to be on a Sunday morning or a weekend. Let me say weekend, because a lot of churches are doing Saturday or whatever. We do a Thursday night, but a weekend worship service. Mm-hmm. That's their engagement point. And so with that being said, one of the things that was a new concept years ago that was added as that funnel begins to get smaller and smaller to the very bottom of the spout, the thing after the getting connected in a small group, getting connected in serving, one of the layers that was added in there, and different churches would do it different way, or different organizations, but one of the layers that was added in there towards the bottom was this idea of disciples making disciples.
Okay. Yeah.
So from the standpoint of, yes, you're involved in a small group, yes, you're serving, working your way down that funnel, but then it's like, when is your faith beginning to multiply itself into the lives of others, where now you are doing the very things that were done to you or done for you, where you in the past, you had been discipled, or you had been led in a small group, or you had been encouraged to serve. Then it gets to this place where now all of a sudden you're the one leading the small group, you're the one encouraging others to serve, or you become a leader of other volunteers. And so there's that layer that I think is added to that funnel. But going back to the sermon piece of it, man, one of the things, Phil Claycomb, who is the director of Nexus Church Planning, he was my coach for a long time, but Phil always challenged me to do I'll have three things, and he called them nuggets. He said every sermon ought to have three nuggets. One for the unbeliever, and like if you look at gold nuggets, like nuggets of information you're walking away with, something I want to hang on to. One was a nugget for the unbeliever. One was a nugget for the new or young believer. Okay. And then one was a nugget for the mature or older believer.
Three nuggets in one message?
In one message. So that way, every single person that is there, no matter what it is you're speaking on, you're intentionally thinking through your audience. And you're thinking about, man, if this person's an unbeliever, I want them to know this. If this person's a new believer, I want them to know this. If this person's an older and more mature believer, I want them to know this. Yeah. And that's a hard thing to do, because when you think about churches, some churches are like, so seeker friendly that they're only trying to hit the unbelievers, or maybe the really, really new believers. And other churches are so focused on discipleship that they're only trying to hit the mature believers, or even new believers. But the reality is, no matter what kind of church you are, if you are a growing church of any sort, whether you're a growing church of 100 or a growing church of 5,000, you're going to have all three of those groups, and maybe even a few other subsets mixed within your service. Yeah. So if your sermon is a time where you have 20 to 30 minutes of captive audience, and you're pouring the words of God into their mind and into their heart, trying to hit each of those three groups of people in some way. And some sermons may be a little more heavy on this one or that one, but at least you're trying to leave a nugget for every single person. Yeah. And so that was always an encouragement to me and a challenge to me. And it's hard sometimes, because you may have a message that is really talking about, the consequences of sin, and you're thinking about it through the lens of an older, mature believer who's still struggling in that. But the reality is the consequences of sin. Man, I can also work that into a significant point for an unbeliever, and let it be something that they kind of wrestle with.
Right.
And so it's just a matter of, man, how do I take that? And even though my mind may be bent towards one specific person, or not even, not people, or not a person, but one specific group of people, in terms of like unbeliever or new believer or old believer, even though my mind may be bent towards one group, I can still figure out ways to speak to those other groups as well in a significant way. And so, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, and it makes it. That's a huge net.
Yeah.
To kind of throw out there. You have to be really, really gifted to try to create a message that does that.
I would love to claim that I was that guy, but I was not that guy.
I mean, at Ranchland, you were really good in the sermons that you had given, and
I appreciate that.
I remember the times that Sean and I went, and the reason why we continued to go is because of the message that you had given, and it was one that was clear, and you can tell it was biblically centered, So to go to the other direction of, and when you're saying you have to go have those three, it's hard for me to think of a small church being able to do that, because you're catering to three different levels. And it's sort of like you're trying to go, and when I think of the Great Commission, disciple and baptize, and those are two very different things. And if you're a small church, even just a plant, right? It seems like you have to go and focus on one thing, as opposed to discipleship. Maybe you focus on baptizing and bringing people that aren't saved, and think of baptism as the purpose of what you're trying to do. And then as you grow bigger, then you look at incorporating discipleship. Maybe, I don't know. Is that a process?
Yes. I would love to sit here and speak from a position of like, man, we did this really, really well. I wish I could. I mean, the reality was, when we helped plant Ranchland, and then 6 months later ended up becoming the lead pastors of it, or maybe 9 months later become the lead pastors of it. I was that guy. I never wanted to be a pastor, let alone a preaching pastor. I was like, no, I mean, God getting me into ministry in the first place was scary enough, because I was like, I grew up in that world a little bit because of my grandparents, and my parents were even considered, national missionaries or in-state missionaries. And so in all that, I understood that world to an extent. Right. I didn't want to be a part of it. I didn't want to do that. I was willing to do anything else for God except for ministry of some sort.
Yeah.
And so getting into that was tough enough, or, being drugged. I feel like God drugged me into it. That was tough enough. But then when I found myself beginning to preach, man, that was a struggle, because one, I never trained in that. I never wanted to do it. I never sat at the feet of other preachers asking to absorb how they do this.
Okay.
Preaching was never something I wanted to do.
You went to seminary though, right?
I didn't go to, I went to a Christian college.
Okay.
But my degree was, yes, it was Bible, but the focus was secondary education. So I technically have a dual major of Bible and secondary education. So where my friends and some of my buddies were doing Bible and youth ministry, or Bible and preaching, I was doing Bible and secondary education. So my goal was to be a teacher and coach.
Okay.
And so, so in all that,
wow, I did not know that. I would have thought with the sermons that you were given that you went to seminary.
I'm glad I deceived you. So, man, no, and that's what's crazy about it is like, man, I can sit back and look at that season of life, and recognize the Holy Spirit's the weight of the Holy Spirit upon that season.
Yeah.
Because I look back on it and I'm like, how did I even come up with sermons? I mean, and thankfully I had some good people come alongside, like Phil Claycomb being one of them, but my grandfather as well.
Okay.
And, the pastor I work for now was a guy that Michelle and I attended that church right after we got married for 5 years. So I look back in my life and I go, man, God put me in position to sit at the feet of some great preachers and people that can help teach me how to preach.
Yeah.
But on the flip side of it, that was never, sitting at their feet was not for the purpose of me learning how to do the art of preaching.
Okay.
Sitting at their feet was just simply, at the time, me learning what it meant to follow Christ, more dependently.
Okay.
So then when I started preaching, I had the ability to reflect back and learn and give me a challenge and tell me I can't do it. And I'm like, all right, fine. I'm going to do this and watch me. And so whenever it came to that preaching thing, and even sometimes my own self-doubt of I'm not capable of doing this was just enough motivation to challenge me. But yet seeing the Holy Spirit move through all that was, man, I was so dependent upon him, because I'm like, I suck as a teacher, as a preacher. And I even think about one time, Michelle, every time I would get done preaching, I'd sit back down beside my wife, Michelle. And I would just, I was at a place so early on where I was needing words of affirmation and confirmation.
Yeah.
Because, I felt like I just poured everything out and it was horrible.
Yeah.
And then I would sit down beside her and we'd do a song closing or whatever. And I'd say, how did I do? And she goes, you did great. She'd always encourage me, always had a word of encouragement for me.
Yeah.
So fast forward like 5-6 years later, there was a point in time where we were talking about something or whatever. And she goes, man, you have improved greatly. And I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, you're preaching, you're teaching, you've come so far. She's being so encouraging, but she's pointing out how far I've come. And it hit me for a moment. And I'm like, whoa. I'm like, you used to tell me how awesome I was doing back then. She's like, yeah, you did good then, but it's gotten a whole lot better because it was hard back then. And I'm like, you lied to me, but it was just one of those things. It's like, I'm so grateful for her.
Yeah.
But there was also that thing of just recognition of recognizing how much God had done over time.
Yeah.
And teaching me and other people investing in me. And it was really, really cool. So
that's neat.
Yeah.
Okay. Something I learned today. So
there you go. I don't know what that has to do with anything, but
no.
Yeah, that was that.
Yeah. Speaking of which, we're like 30 minutes in and we haven't talked about the next episode. So
yeah, maybe we should do that.
Yeah, the free format is great, but we might not get to do anything if we keep going down these rabbit holes. So going back to what we were trying to go and do, because last week I was talking about Hebrews. So Hebrews 12, that's a series I'm going through right now, through sermons and just listening to different sermons. And it's interesting that the sermon I'm listening to, Tim Keller, is going through Hebrews, and it's been going that way for the last maybe couple weeks.
Okay.
And Shai just sent me the one I had just listened to. Hebrews 12. When I listened to it the morning, maybe Tuesday or Wednesday, she sent it to me a couple hours later. So she listened to it too. And it was like uncoordinated, right?
Yeah.
And then I listened to John Piper, and his message was on Hebrews 12, the same scriptures. And so every time I see these things line up, I think, okay, pay attention, because I don't want to get slapped in the head with something to say, I told you. I told you, look at Hebrews 12. I gave it to you 3 times and you still didn't pay attention. So I started looking at that one, and that's kind of in line with what we were talking about last week, which was just this idea. Well, this wraps it up for this episode of A Financial Advisor and Pastor Walk Into a Bar. Listen to part 2 when we take a deep dive into Hebrews 12. Thanks for listening.